Hello. Nice to see you all today. We're going to finish the threefold, interview on approaches to learning and teaching. Today we'll cover observational learning. Today we'll cover operant, classical conditioning, contiguity, and basically the behavioral school of thought. So this school of thought about learning, teaching, and education is behaviorism, and behaviorists, as the name implies, help us understand why we behave as we do. So they are interested in finding out how external environmental stimuli cause overt or observable learner behavior and how modifying a learner's environment can change behavior. So if you have studied psychology, you probably learned something about contiguity, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and social learning, concepts of prime interest to behaviorists. Contiguity. Contiguity refers to simple stimulus-response pairings, associations, or connections, such as lightning and thunder, which occur closely together. When one experience a stimulus is regularly associated with another, a response, this connection is established. Like the combination of lightning and thunder, the SR connection usually occurs within a very brief time span, thus the contiguity label. We can learn by simple stimulus-response pairing such facts as Columbus landing in America in 1492 and 9 on 763. What about other concept? It's a classical conditioning. Classical conditioning refers to learning that occurs when you already have an established connection onto contiguity between a primary or original stimulus and a response, and then we pair a new secondary stimulus with the original stimulus long enough that it begins to evoke the original response even when the original stimulus is absent. Remember Pavlov's dogs? Pavlov, a Russian psychologist, found that his experimental dogs naturally salivated, or we can say responded, when his lab assistants fed them meat powder as stimulus. Later, he found that the mere presence of his lab assistants' new stimulus caused the dogs to anticipate being fed and to salivate. Let's consider a school example. Students and teachers alike associate a bell stimulus with the ending of a class period. Teachers often assign homework at or near the close of class, thus the mere assignment of homework new stimulus will elicit many behaviors or responses associated with the ringing of the bell, packing book bags, and so forth. For this reason, some teachers assign homework at the beginning of the class. What is operant conditioning? Operant conditioning refers to learning facilitated through reinforcement. A learner does something correctly or appropriately and consequently receives a reward. Operant conditioning presumes that if we do something we are rewarded for or which is rewarding in itself, we will do it again. Conversely, if we do something that is not rewarded or rewarding, we will be less likely to repeat the behavior. Operant conditioning is based upon a pleasure-pain view of human behavior. To illustrate, consider Jason, a learner who has turned in an essay on gun control. The teacher has dutifully analyzed the essay and responded to it as follows. The assignment is completed, well written. You have found and used many references, you have presented the major points on both sides, and you have drawn your own thoughtful conclusions. Obviously, you enjoy studying issues and responding to them. May I place your paper on the bulletin board? Assuming Jason finds the teacher's comments in the display of his paper rewarding, he likely will want to write another essay. Chapters 11-14 will discuss more about reinforcement. What is observational learning? Observational learning, Maytinet, is that you can learn a lot by watching others. According to its early theorist, Bandura, for observational learning to be effective, learners must attend to someone's behavior, retain what they observed, the model doing, imitate or reproduce the behavior they saw, and experience reinforcement or satisfaction as a consequence. We know learners are most likely to model persons who are somewhat like themselves and whom they perceive as competent, warm, or powerful. Thus, primarily children frequently identify with parents or with television and movie characters, especially superheroes, and mimic what they do. A kindergarten teacher describes an example of social learning. The resurgence of Batman. Raymond brought in a cape, and all the children were anxious to wear it around the room in it. During free play, children were busy making Batman equipment. Story time and singing time were always interrupted by children who were busy describing Batman antics. The entire morning was Batman oriented, and the children could not be interested in much else. If an elementary school has a Halloween parade, characters such as Raphael, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, Snow White, Spider-Man, or Harry Potter readily appear. On the other hand, if middle and secondary students have the occasion to wear costumes, they look more like dress and act like rock or hip hop personalities or athletes. Such learning also occurs when we see something good or bad happen to another person. For example, if we were to see a friend praised for her schoolwork, we might try to imitate what she does so we can be praised too. Conversely, we might avoid doing that another student does if it is not well received. If you hold to classical conditioning, operant conditioning, observational learning, you will do the following. First of all, make the classroom enjoyable intellectually, socially, and physically, so that the learners feel safe and secure. Then be open and specific about what needs to be learned. Use specific behavior objectives when writing lesson plans and share those objectives with learners. Then be certain that learners have basic knowledge and skill to do that. It means probably they are not as stupid as you think, though. Then show connection of new learning to previous learning, and when new material is complex, introduce it gradually. Organize new material into sequential, short, easy, learned parts. Then associate what is to be learned with things learners like. For example, associate poetry with rap. Conversely, don't associate what is to be learned with things learners don't like. For example, don't use schoolwork as punishment. Then tell learners what is most important and recognize and praise it. Don't expect those students to learn at the same pace and the same amounts. Find out what is rewarding to a student and use that to reinforce student learning. Some students may be rewarded by receiving verbal public praise, while others may find it embarrassing. Then, when a task is new or difficult, provide more regular reinforcement. Once learners have mastered a new task, use only occasional reinforcement. Then reinforce the learning behavior you expect from students. For example, attending, engaging, trying, responding, improving, and completing. Then encourage shy or insecure learners' responses. Look for shy children who do not volunteer and give them opportunity. Caution students to respect responses of others that differ from their own or even are incorrect. Then create situations whereby each student has the opportunity to succeed. Model behavior that you want learners to imitate. For example, show enthusiasm for learning, respect for all. Then draw attention to students who demonstrate desirable behavior or produce quality work, but do not point of causing them to be alienated from their peers. And ask parents to enforce desired behaviors at home, to recognize enthusiasm for learning, effort, and growth. So you probably have already noticed that many behaviorist beliefs described previously are similar to those held within the cognitive school of thought. And the main and major difference are that behaviorists more often advocate that it should be organized into short-term, easily learned parts. Improvements should be recognized and praised. Every child should have opportunities to succeed, and learning behaviors should be reinforced. Let's attending, trying, completing, and so on. Then mutual respect is essential, then everyone counts and is important, and that learning is never associated with punishment. Behaviorists are more likely to use carrots and sticks to get kids to learn. Since the dignity of learners is important to behaviorists, some of the above characteristics are like those held within the humanistic school. Certain instructional alternatives are more supportive of the beliefs of behaviorists. Of those, direct instruction comes closest. Direct instruction generally advocates presenting information in small steps using many illustrations and examples for reinforcement, asking learners many questions in order to check for understanding and providing corrective feedback, providing lots of practice, ensuring learning by keeping students on task for long as it takes. What are additional ways of teaching advocated by behaviorists? First of all, this is programmed instruction. Programmed instruction involves organizing material to be learned or practiced into small parts called frames. Learners respond to a question or problem, stimulus in each frame. If their response is correct, they receive positive reinforcement and the next frame is presented. When learners respond incorrectly, they may be asked to repeat or to be given more information to help them produce correct response. And learners utilizing programmed instruction typically work at their own pace. Secondly, this is a computer-assisted instruction. Computer-assisted instruction refers to the use of computers to present programmed instruction or to otherwise assist learners with specific learning tasks. Many different kinds of computer-assisted instruction programs are available and must require learners to engage in lots of drill and practice. Although most programs follow an operant conditioning, stimuli response reinforcement pattern, computer-assisted instruction also can be used as a cognitivist approach. Some computer-assisted instruction programs, like programmed instructions, teach new concepts and other engage learners in creative tasks and problem solving. For example, some computer software programs encourage children to make up stories and to illustrate them or provide simulations for problem solving or creativity. The next one is mastery learning. Mastery learning is a third educational practice based upon a behavioral theory. It too allows students to learn academic material at their own pace. In practice, all students in a class might be expected to reach a certain level of proficiency, for example, at least 80% correct answers on a geography test. Those who fail to reach this criterion level may receive additional time corrective instruction until they obtain their score. The general intent is to give immediate additional help to slow achievers so that stay even with higher or faster achievers, while lower slow achievers receive corrective instructions, higher fast achievers engage in enrichment work on the same or similar topic. Advocates of mastery learning propose first to prepare a lesson with clear, specific objectives. Second, use learning material that allows students to accomplish those objectives. And three, prepare to not one but two tests. Following instruction, students take test one, those that meet some pre-established passing criteria, such as 80%. Move on to supplementary enrichment activities, while this following short receive corrective instructions based on different instructional approach, using different instructional materials. So you see it's very different. The next concept is precious teaching, and precious teaching encourages learners master a factor skill, such as correctly spelling a word or applying an arithmetic algorithm such as division, and then continue practicing their skills until they receive a high level of precision or fluency. And practice makes perfect. This is a quotation. Teachers using precious teaching might give daily 1-minute practice exercises as multiplication facts and chart many items are correct. Learners also chart progress. Its tenets derive from principles of information processing. The next one is applied behavioral analysis, and we can abbreviate it as ABA. ABA is also based upon behavioral beliefs and findings and is informed by principles of operant conditioning. It is often used in clinical settings as hospitals, prisons, and schools to modify the behavior of clients toward more acceptable patterns. ABA follows a prescribed procedure and first the practitioner, for example, you, the teacher, identify a student or a client and the student's behavior that is to be changed. You then determine how often the student presently performs the desired behavior, for example, waiting to be called on before talking. This is called the baseline. Next, you introduce an intervention. Intervention usually is some reinforcement the student receives every time she performs the desirable behavior. This user reinforcement encourages the student to behave appropriately more often, that is, more than the client did at the outset or baseline. Here is an illustration of ABA in a classroom. Jane produces very little when given a writing assignment, even one of her choice. In more cases, her text amounts to a few short sentences. Because she's fairly conversational, you decide you might encourage her to be more forthcoming by having her tell you what she would like to say. As she does, you prompt her to write down the ideas she's expressed, and each time Jane writes her this in writing assignment, you praise her for an increase in the number of each of her ideas. When you evaluate her written work, you comment that increasingly Jane's compositions are more complete and interesting. You may even share one or more with the class. Behavioral analysis always uses the principles of operant conditioning, and a close cousin is behavioral modification, which is also an attempt to change behavior, but it is a more general concept that includes use of hypnosis, drug therapy, or electroconvulsive shock treatment as well. So thank you so much for listening to me up today. See you next time. Goodbye.